I'm David Rodriguez, Senior Emergency Communications Dispatcher at the Jefferson County Emergency Operations Center in Birmingham, Alabama. Or at least I was until I submitted my resignation last month after 15 years of faithful service to this community. My credentials speak for themselves. Certified Emergency Medical Dispatch through the National Academy of Emergency Medical Dispatch, Advanced Police Dispatch Certification from the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials, and over 40 hours of continuing education annually. I've handled everything from routine medical calls to multi-vehicle accidents, active shooter situations, and natural disasters that required coordinating response teams across 3 counties. I've heard the worst of humanity through those headphones. The panic in a mother's voice as she watches her child slip beneath the surface of a backyard pool. The labored breathing of a heart attack victim alone in their apartment at 3 in the morning. The desperate whispers of domestic violence victims hiding in closets while their abusers pound on bedroom doors. I thought I'd develop the emotional callus necessary to process human suffering and translate it into actionable emergency response protocols. But what I'm about to tell you is the one call that made me question everything I thought I knew about emergency communications and ultimately led me to leave the profession entirely. It wasn't the content of the call itself that disturbed me, though that was disturbing enough. It was the technical impossibilities that surrounded it, the data that defied every protocol I'd learned, and the fact that 3 other experienced dispatchers witnessed the same impossible events. The Jefferson County Emergency Operations Center operates 24 hours a day from a fortified concrete building on 5th Avenue North. Our dispatch floor houses 12 workstations arranged in a horseshoe configuration, each equipped with dual monitors displaying computer-aided dispatch software, enhanced 911 location mapping, and radio communication interfaces for police, fire, and medical units. The walls are lined with digital clocks showing time zones across the state, alongside large screen displays tracking active incidents and resource deployment. My workstation, Console 7, faced the southeastern wall where Shift Supervisor Janet Morrison maintained oversight of our operations. To my left sat Tommy Castellanos, a 9-year veteran specializing in fire dispatch. And to my right was Sarah Kim, our newest hire who'd completed field training just 6 months earlier. Behind us, Console 4 was staffed by Andrea Walsh, whose 23 years of experience made her our informal mentor for complex, multi-jurisdictional incidents. On Tuesday, March 15th, 2023, I reported for my regular 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift. The afternoon had been unusually quiet. A handful of fender benders, 2 medical assists for elderly residents, and 1 domestic disturbance that resolved without incident. By 8:47 p.m., our active incident board showed only 3 pending calls: a noise complaint awaiting officer availability, a medical transport stuck in traffic, and a burglar alarm that had already been determined false. I was updating incident reports when Console 7's primary line illuminated with an incoming emergency call. The enhanced 911 display showed the caller identification as Matthews James R., with a registered address at 2847 Oakwood Drive, a residential area in our coverage zone. The location coordinates populated automatically. Latitude 33.4921, longitude 86.8456, standard protocol. 911, what's your emergency? I answered, simultaneously opening a new incident file and preparing to input caller information. Please help me, came a man's voice, steady but strained. There's someone in my house. They're doing something to my daughter. I began typing, creating incident. Nader 2023 034 7219. Sir, I'm going to help you. Can you tell me your name and confirm your address? James Matthews, 2847 Oakwood Drive. Please, I can hear her screaming from the basement. The address matched our system perfectly. I dispatched 2 patrol units, Car 23 and Car 31, with an estimated response time of 4 minutes. Mr. Matthews, are you in a safe location right now? I'm hiding in the upstairs bedroom. I called 911 as soon as I heard the commotion downstairs. My daughter Emily was doing homework in the basement when I heard glass breaking and then, God, the screaming. How old is Emily, Mr. Matthews? 16. She's just 16. I could hear genuine terror in his voice, the kind that can't be faked. In 15 years, you develop an ear for authentic distress versus attention-seeking or prank calls. James Matthews was experiencing real fear. Sir, I need you to stay on the line with me. Officers are en route. Can you describe the intruder? I haven't seen him clearly. When I heard the glass break, I went to the top of the basement stairs and saw someone moving around down there. Tall, wearing dark clothes. That's when Emily started screaming, and I ran back upstairs to call you. Standard home invasion protocol required me to keep the caller away from the suspect while gathering tactical information for responding officers. Mr. Matthews, do not try to confront the intruder. Stay where you are. Can you still hear your daughter? Yes, she's... Oh God, she's begging him to stop. What is he doing to her? Car 23 radioed their arrival at 8:51 p.m. Officer Peterson's voice came through clear on the tactical channel. Dispatch, Car 23 on scene. Residence appears secure from exterior. No signs of forced entry. Requesting backup for entry and search. This struck me as odd. James Matthews had reported hearing glass breaking, indicating forced entry through a window or door. Car 23, caller reports suspect gained entry through broken glass, likely basement level. Copy that, dispatch. Car 31 is pulling up now. We'll check the basement exterior. While officers positioned themselves outside, James Matthews continued providing information. They're moving around down there now. I can hear furniture being dragged across the floor. Emily isn't screaming anymore, but I can hear whimpering. Mr. Matthews, I need you to listen carefully. Officers are outside your house right now. They're going to make entry and search for your daughter. Stay in the bedroom with the door locked until an officer comes to get you. Officer Peterson's voice returned. Dispatch, we've circled the residence. All basement windows appear intact. No signs of forced entry anywhere on the property. Front door is locked. Back door is locked. Requesting permission to use master key for entry. I felt the first flutter of confusion. Car 23, caller reports ongoing home invasion with suspect in basement level. Daughter may be in immediate danger. Understood. Making entry now. The next few minutes unfolded according to standard protocol. Officers Peterson and Martinez entered the residence and began a systematic room-by-room search. I maintained constant communication with James Matthews, who reported he could still hear movement in the basement. At 8:56 p.m., Officer Peterson's radio transmission changed everything. Dispatch, residence is clear. No signs of forced entry, no suspects located. Basement is empty. Request you advise caller we need to speak with him. Mr. Matthews, I said carefully, officers have searched your house and they need to speak with you. They're going to come upstairs to the bedroom now. What about Emily? Did they find Emily? Sir, just unlock the bedroom door. The officers will explain everything. I heard voices in the background as the officers made contact with James Matthews. Then Officer Peterson returned to radio. Dispatch, we have a problem. Caller states his daughter Emily is missing, but we've searched the entire residence, including basement. No signs of struggle, no broken glass, no indication anyone else was in the house. This is where protocol became complicated. Missing persons reports require specific timeframes and evidence of foul play. But James Matthews had just spent 10 minutes describing an active home invasion with his daughter being assaulted in the basement. Car 23 requests you bring caller to station for formal statement, treating as possible missing person case. Copy that. Caller is extremely agitated, insists someone was in his basement with his daughter. We're going to transport for interview. I closed incident 2023-0034-721 at 9:12 p.m. with a preliminary classification of unfounded no criminal activity located. But something felt wrong. James Matthews' fear had been genuine, his descriptions detailed and consistent. In 15 years, I'd never encountered a caller who fabricated such an elaborate scenario in real time with that level of emotional authenticity. The following morning, I accessed the call recording for quality review. Standard procedure required documenting any discrepancies between caller statements and officer findings. I put on my headphones and played back the 25-minute conversation with James Matthews. That's when I discovered the first impossibility. At timestamp 14:37 in the recording, while James Matthews was describing hearing his daughter Emily screaming in the basement, a second voice became audible in the background. Female, young, clearly distressed. "Daddy, help me! He's hurting me!" I replayed that section 12 times. The voice was unmistakable. A teenage girl calling for help while James Matthews was speaking to me about hearing her screams. But according to the officers who searched the house, no one else was present in the residence. I called Tommy Castellanos over to Console 7. "Listen to this and tell me what you hear." Tommy put on the spare headphones and I played the 1437 section. His face went pale. "That's definitely a girl's voice. Sounds terrified. But Peterson said the house was empty." "That's what I thought too." Sarah Kim joined us, and we played the section for her as well. Same reaction. All three of us clearly heard Emily Matthews pleading for help in the background of her father's emergency call. But the responding officers found no trace of her in the residence. I pulled the computer-aided dispatch log for incident Charters 2023-034-7219. The timestamps were correct, the location coordinates matched, and Officer Peterson's report was filed according to protocol. But there was an additional entry I hadn't noticed before. At 8:52 p.m., exactly when James Matthews reported his daughter had stopped screaming, our system registered a second 911 call from the same address. The log showed, "Call received 20:52:14, disconnected before answer, no callback successful." I accessed the recording for that second call. When I played it back, I heard only silence for 37 seconds before the line went dead. But the enhanced 911 system had captured caller identification data, Matthews, Emily J., with the same address as her father's call. Emily Matthews had called 911 from inside the house at the exact moment her father reported she'd stopped screaming. The call lasted 37 seconds of silence before disconnecting. But according to officers who searched the residence immediately afterward, Emily Matthews was not in the house. I printed both call logs and the incident report, then walked to Supervisor Morrison's office. Janet had been running dispatch operations for 18 years and had seen every type of communication anomaly possible. But when I played both recordings for her, she couldn't provide any explanation. "David, this doesn't make sense," she said, reviewing the paperwork. "We have the father calling about a home invasion, officers finding no evidence of forced entry or suspects, and a second call from the daughter that registers on our system but contains only silence. Either our equipment is malfunctioning or something else is going on. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Should I contact Officer Peterson for follow-up?" "Yes, and also run a diagnostic on Console 7. I want to rule out technical problems before we file this as an unusual incident." Technical Services ran a complete diagnostic on Console 7's recording equipment, enhanced 911 interface, and computer-aided dispatch software. Everything tested within normal parameters. The recordings were genuine, the caller identification data was accurate, and the timestamp logs were synchronized with atomic time standards. Our equipment had functioned perfectly during both calls. Officer Peterson's follow-up report provided additional disturbing details. James Matthews had been transported to headquarters for a formal interview, where he maintained his account of the home invasion. He described hearing glass breaking, his daughter screaming from the basement, and furniture being moved around by an intruder. When asked about Emily's whereabouts, he stated she should have been in the house doing homework. But here's what made Peterson's report impossible to process. Emily Matthews had been dead for 3 years. According to the police database, Emily Matthews, age 16, had died in a car accident on March 15, 2020, exactly 3 years before her father's 911 call. She was buried in Elmwood Cemetery on March 22, 2020. James Matthews had been receiving grief counseling through Jefferson County Mental Health Services since his daughter's death. I stared at Peterson's report for 10 minutes, trying to reconcile the information. James Matthews had called 911, reporting a home invasion targeting his daughter Emily. During that call, Emily's voice was clearly audible, pleading for help. Our system registered a second call from Emily's phone line, but Emily Matthews had been dead for 3 years. The rational explanation was that James Matthews was experiencing some form of psychological episode, possibly related to the anniversary of his daughter's death. Grief can manifest in various ways, including auditory hallucinations and false memories. But that didn't explain how Emily's voice appeared on our recording or how our enhanced 911 system received and logged a call from her phone number. I requested the technical specifications for Emily Matthews' phone line. The account had been canceled in April 2020, 1 month after her death. The phone number had been reassigned to a different customer in May 2020. There was no active service associated with Emily Matthews' name and no physical device that could have generated a call from her identifier. Yet our system had recorded a 911 call from Matthews, Emily J. at 8:52 p.m. on March 15, 2023. Tommy Castellanos found me during break, looking troubled. David, I've been thinking about that Matthews call. Something similar happened on my shift last year, but I never reported it because I thought I was just tired. What do you mean similar? Got a call from a woman reporting her husband was having a heart attack. I dispatched medical and fire rescue, but when they arrived, the house was empty. No signs of medical emergency, no husband anywhere on the property. The woman insisted she'd been performing CPR on him while talking to me. What did the paramedics find? Nothing. But here's the weird part. I pulled the recording later, and you could hear a man's voice in the background, gasping and saying he couldn't breathe. Just like your Emily Matthews situation. Did you check the husband's status? Tommy nodded grimly. Heart attack victim 2 years earlier. Died in the same house where his wife called 911 about him. We spent the next hour searching through archived incident reports, looking for similar patterns. What we found was disturbing. Over the past 2 years, Jefferson County Emergency Operations had received at least 6 calls involving deceased individuals. September 2021, father reporting his son drowning in backyard pool. Son had drowned in the same pool in 2019. January 2022, mother calling about daughter's drug overdose. Daughter had died from overdose in 2020. June 2022, wife reporting husband's fall from roof. Husband had fallen from same roof in 2021. October 2022, grandmother calling about grandchild's asthma attack. Child had died from asthma complications in 2021. December 2022, Tommy's heart attack call. March 2023, James Matthews and Emily. In every case, the caller reported an emergency involving someone who had already died, often in similar circumstances and sometimes on anniversary dates. In every case, responding officers or medical personnel found no evidence of the reported emergency. And in every case, our recordings captured voices of the deceased individuals in distress. I brought this information to Supervisor Morrison, expecting her to dismiss it as coincidence or equipment malfunction. Instead, she sat in silence for several minutes, reviewing the reports. David, I need you to understand that what you're describing is impossible according to everything we know about emergency communications technology. Our enhanced 911 system receives calls through physical telephone networks, not from wherever these voices are coming from. But we have the recordings. We have the call logs. The technical diagnostics show our equipment is functioning normally. I know. That's what makes this so disturbing. She pulled a file from her desk drawer. I haven't shared this with anyone, but I've been tracking unusual calls for the past year. What you've found matches my own documentation. We're receiving emergency calls from people who shouldn't be able to make calls. Morrison's file contained detailed analysis of each impossible call, including technical data from our enhanced 911 system. The pattern was consistent. Grieving family members called 911, reporting emergencies involving deceased relatives. The deceased individuals' voices appeared on recordings, and our system logged secondary calls from their discontinued phone numbers. Have you contacted the phone company about this? I asked. 3 times. They've run diagnostics on our trunk lines and found no irregularities. According to their engineering department, our system is receiving genuine calls from valid phone numbers, even when those numbers have been disconnected for years. What about other dispatch centers? Are they experiencing similar incidents? Morrison shook her head. I've reached out to surrounding counties informally. Nothing like this is happening elsewhere. It appears to be isolated to our facility. The implications were staggering. Our Emergency Operations Center was somehow receiving authentic 911 calls from deceased individuals, calls that registered on our computerized systems, despite originating from disconnected phone lines. The voices were clear, the distress was genuine, and the technical data confirmed these were legitimate emergency communications. But from whom? And why? Over the following weeks, I found myself questioning every call that came through Console 7. When elderly residents called for medical assistance, I wondered if they were calling about living relatives or deceased ones. When parents reported missing children, I checked death records to verify the children were still alive. The confidence I'd built over 15 years of emergency dispatch was crumbling. Sarah Kim approached me near the end of March with another disturbing discovery. She'd been reviewing training materials about psychological effects of emergency work when she found a reference to anniversary calls, a documented phenomenon where surviving family members unconsciously call 911 on the anniversary of traumatic events, sometimes believing the events are happening again. But David, she said, anniversary calls are supposed to be psychological. The caller experiences a flashback or false memory, but there's no actual emergency taking place. They don't involve voices of deceased people appearing on recordings. Unless we're dealing with something beyond standard psychology. That's what scares me. If these calls aren't explained by grief hallucinations, then what's causing them? I didn't have an answer. The rational part of my mind insisted there must be a technical explanation. Some form of equipment malfunction that created false recordings, or a systematic error in our database that showed living people as deceased. But 3 months of investigation had eliminated all rational explanations. Our enhanced 911 equipment was functioning normally. The deceased individuals were genuinely deceased, confirmed through multiple sources. The recordings contained authentic voices expressing real distress. And the technical data proved these calls were being received through legitimate telephone networks. The only conclusion was that we were somehow receiving emergency calls from dead people. On a humid Friday evening in late April, Console 7 received another impossible call. The enhanced 911 display showed Williams Margaret A. with an address on Southside. An elderly woman's voice, shaky but clear. 911, I need an ambulance. My husband collapsed in the kitchen. I think he's having another heart attack. I dispatched medical units while gathering information from Margaret Williams. She described her husband Robert clutching his chest and falling to the floor, the same symptoms he'd experienced during his previous heart attack. She was performing CPR while talking to me, and I could hear a man's labored breathing in the background. Paramedics arrived to find Margaret Williams alone in her kitchen, performing CPR on empty floor space. There was no husband present, no medical emergency taking place. Margaret insisted Robert had collapsed right there, that she'd been trying to save him while calling 911. Later investigation revealed that Robert Williams had died of a heart attack in the same kitchen 18 months earlier. Margaret had been in a memory care facility since December, suffering from advanced dementia. But our recording clearly captured Robert Williams's voice gasping for breath while his widow tried to save him. That call broke something fundamental in my understanding of reality. For 15 years, I'd believed emergency dispatch was a straightforward process. People in crisis call 911, we gather information and coordinate response. Officers or medical personnel resolve the situation. Clean, logical, comprehensible. But now I was handling calls from a place where the living and the dead somehow intersected, where desperate voices reached across whatever barrier separates life from death to cry for help one final time. And the most disturbing aspect was that these calls followed all the technical protocols of genuine emergency communications. I submitted my resignation on Monday, May 8, 2023. In my final report to Supervisor Morrison, I documented 23 calls over 2 years that appeared to involve deceased individuals. Each call had been technically verified through our enhanced 911 system. Each recording contained authentic voices, and each incident occurred according to standard emergency communication protocols. The only impossible element was that the callers or victims had been dead for months or years. I can't continue in a profession where I can no longer distinguish between emergency calls from living people and emergency calls from the dead, I wrote. My ability to provide effective emergency services has been compromised by experiences that defy rational explanation. Morrison accepted my resignation without argument. She understood that witnessing impossible events repeatedly can destroy a person's confidence in their professional judgment. But she also made one final request. David, don't discuss this with anyone outside the department. People need to trust that 911 will be there when they call. If word gets out that we're receiving calls from dead people, It could undermine public faith in emergency services. I agreed to her request, but I also couldn't stop thinking about the implications. If our dispatch center was receiving emergency calls from deceased individuals, how many other impossible communications were we handling without recognizing them? How many calls that seemed routine actually involved circumstances beyond our understanding? The night before I left Jefferson County Emergency Operations, I sat at Console 7 for the final time and listened to the recording of James Matthews calling about his daughter Emily. Her voice in the background was just as clear as it had been 2 months earlier. "Daddy, help me! He's hurting me!" Emily Matthews had been reaching out for help 3 years after her death, calling 911 from whatever place she now existed, trying to connect with her father who was still grieving her loss. And our enhanced 911 system had somehow bridged the gap between the living and the dead to carry her plea for assistance. I removed my headphones and logged out of Console 7 for the final time, knowing I was leaving behind the most disturbing mystery I'd ever encountered. But I also knew I could no longer function effectively in a job where the impossible had become routine, where the voices of the dead called for help through the same telephone lines that carried emergency calls from the living. As I walked out of the Jefferson County Emergency Operations Center, I wondered how many other 911 dispatchers across the country were handling similar calls without recognizing them. How many emergency responses were being coordinated for situations that existed in the space between life and death, where desperate voices still cry out for help long after their physical ability to speak has ended. The most haunting realization was that death might not end our capacity to call for help, only our ability to receive it.